L. Ron Howard wanted to start a cult.
L. Ron Hubbard.
That's 100% L. Ron Howard.
It's 100% L. Ron Hubbard.
It's 100% L. Ron Howard. 100%. What you gotta do is break him down. You gotta L. Ron Howard him.
That's not a thing. So much about Scientology except the guy's name. That's the easiest part of it. What would they invent Scientology like after he directed Backdraft in Apollo 13?
No, that was Ron Howard. I'm talking about L. Ron Howard.
Oh my God.
Guys, can we please stop?
I do always laugh at that. It's not intentional. I really do find that funny. How you doing, Mirriam?
I'm good. Yeah. How about you?
Not bad, thank you. Not bad. I'm so glad we're finally doing this. We've been talking for about a month and a half, maybe 2 months now. Thank you to Mike Brown for giving each other contact details. But yeah, I'm glad to finally be here with you, actually. Excited.
Me too.
On a Friday night. What time is it where you're at?
Saturday afternoon. Yeah. So it's
okay,
nice.
Saturday afternoon. Nice. Friday night for me. So I do have a margarita. Not a gin.
Ooh.
Not a gin, which is what they drink in 1984, by the way.
That's right. Victory
And
gin. Yeah.
Gin is basically rocket fuel. I don't know if you're a gin person, but oh my God, that's strong.
I've never had a thing, but I know that there are people that it's like a thing for them. Like gin is it.
Oh,
yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, you can make a margarita taste like a fruit punch, or depending on how strong you like the mix in there. But basically, it's a salad, in my opinion. But gin, no matter what you put in it, it burns your nostrils and just fire. I mean, it gets you so fast, so
Wow.
fast.
Reminds me of that one time that I tried moonshine.
What?
That's
tried
a whole
moonshine?
other story. Yeah, and it was like it was really, really high percentage proof. I couldn't swallow it. Like I
Oh
took
my
a sip and I
goodness.
just expelled from my mouth. Like it wasn't even a choice. But yeah,
your buddy knew it was
that's a-
poison right away. It was like out.
My buddy had 6 liters of it. She was given 6 liters, and by the time I was trying it, that was her last liter left.
Wow.
But that's wild country. That's up like north of Northern Territory, north of Australia. Yeah, Mataranka. That's a Mataranka story for any of the Australian peeps out there.
Wow. Okay,
yeah.
that's crazy. No, can I ask you, if you don't mind? It's a little bit personal question. Do you drink now at all?
I rarely do, but I have I have stints where I'm drinking and then stints where I'm completely sober. So at the moment, I haven't been drinking. I'm drinking water today. I haven't been drinking alcohol probably for a couple of months, I'd say.
Okay.
Or maybe I'd say definitely like the last month for sure. And I think that's just because of everything going on. I just felt like I needed to be like crystal clear,
Yes.
and just, and not even, I guess, just have alertness at all times.
I
Just
totally
felt like I had to
get
be
that.
on my toes and didn't want to kind of turn that down. So yeah.
No, I get that. And I'm not
Yeah.
pushing it on you. I was just wondering, because, you just different people. I don't drink a lot. I really don't. I drink maybe once a week. And now everyone in the live can say you're lying because they saw me with a drink last night and then they saw me with a drink last Sunday. But I try to make it once a week. But I also drink a ton of water, because if you don't have water with it, it's gonna take you out pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. You're
I
pretty
always forget to
fit and
say this, but
healthy.
what's that?
I said you're pretty fit and healthy as well, and it's all about balance. All about balance.
It is about balance. I wish I was healthier than I am. I'm doing a little bit of rehab right now, but we'll get back there. We'll get back there. Age sucks. I got to be honest with you. If Scientology had a way to stop aging, I might have stayed, to be honest with you.
Yes. The trick is you got to go get back into that baby body and start again.
Yeah, right.
It's like, God, I got to start all back over.
Yeah.
And if you're lucky, you're going to retain your memories. So yeah. That's why.
That was something that I always had a hard time believing, because I never saw it when I was there. It was like I was just waiting for that thing to get there and for it to be shown and proved. I just, I couldn't. It was weird.
You just never got that EP.
No, never.
And Phenomena. My earliest childhood memory of receiving auditing, and it was probably the only real sort of grade level type auditing that I did. And I was about 8 years old, I reckon, and as best as I can recall. And I just remember I would go and hide in the bathroom. Like I'd be like, I would just keep telling my otter that I needed to go to the toilet, and I would go into the bathroom, and I would just stay in there for as long as conceivably possible, to the point where she would be knocking on the door. And then I would be like, "Oh, I'm hungry." So that would be my next thing. So then she'd have to go to the galley and get a piece of cheese, come back, give that to me. Like I was just like, I did not want it. I was like, no.
Did you ever get it where the auditor would take you with them to go get the food?
No, she just left me in there. I mean, I just remember just being in the bathroom, and then she would go and get the cheese and come back. Okay. It was like a mouse, and she, was bringing the cheese. But yeah, to like lure me out of the bathroom. I just didn't want to do it. And that was grade 0 quads. And it was so repetitive because they just ask you questions, like very similar repetitive questions over and over, that with slight variations. And I'd had such a high hope for auditing. I was like, oh, I'm going to get this really cool, mysterious, amazing thing. And when it was happening, I was like, "Oh, right, get me out of here! Make it stop!"
You were
the whole time.
right away. Right away.
I was devastated. Yeah. They used to come and pick me up from the ATA and take me to the Celebrity Center to get it done, and that's a whole weird situation that was going on at the time. But
we're gonna have to talk about that sometime, because I didn't know anyone that had that going to Celebrity Center. I
think it was unique to what I found out recently was that. And we won't veer off into this whole thing,
because we could easily.
I found out, we won't. We'll stay on track. But I found out recently that it was known at that time period within the Celebrity Center, which is where my father worked. And it was actually the person who worked with him in the same office as him was the person that was picking me up and taking me and auditing me in their office room. So it wasn't in the auditing room. It wasn't in the course room. It was in their office. In the Div 6, like public. It was the events. My father managed all the events at the Celebrity Center Pavilion. He did all the CC Kids on Stage events. And and it was at that particular time that somebody else separate, like just emailed me and told me that it was known about at Celebrity Center, which was earlier than I knew it to have been known about. But anyways, we won't get sidetracked on that. Okay. But
that's something we'll definitely cover.
Yeah, it was strange. It's hindsight.
It could only be strange if you knew, like to me, that was right away. I mean, anyone else that's listening probably was like, oh, I don't totally get right away. I'm like, wait, you were getting audited at Celebrity Center? I mean, that's not usual. But you know what? I'm finding out there's so many. I spoke to Liz Ferris last night. It was such a fun conversation. I was just in such a good mood when I was done talking to her. She was, we basically were next to each other for like 5 years of our life, but we never really talked. But we were in the same place, enjoying the same activities, going through the same trauma. It was just crazy, and it was it's fascinating because I think all of our stories are so unique in so many ways. Yours included.
Yeah, that conversation was fascinating. You guys were taking trips down memory lanes, and I was like so there with you. I'm just like visualizing the buildings that you guys are talking about, the places and stuff like that. And then also what was interesting was that like your parents were working for the same organizations at different times. So you did really have that really correlate. Like you knew the same people, you knew the same places. It was like, amazing.
And the chance that we didn't really know each other is very, very slim. But it was interesting because there was times when we were able to escape and just be a little bit of that child. But it was so far and few in between. It was these little moments that you'll always remember. And you probably remember them because they were so few and far in between. You didn't have that many joyous moments. And the ones you did have, you remember the people that you loved then, you remember, et cetera, et cetera. I always forget to do this. Like, I've got to do it right now. Guys, if you're in here, please hit that like button. It helps get the notifications out, apparently. I'm not going to ask you to subscribe already to my channel because, everyone says to do that, but I am going to ask you to subscribe to Mirriam's channel, which is Against the Dark Arts. And I love that you used a Star Wars reference for your channel. I thought that was really...
It was not Star Wars.
I know.
It's so funny. I'm not a sci-fi person at all, but I do love fantasy and mystery. And it was Harry Potter inspired.
I know. I was just having fun with you.
Hilarious. But but you know what's amazing is and that's like defense against the dark arts.
Yes.
I was reading the Harry Potter books while I was inside the Sea Organization as a teenager. Of course, they came out like over a period of years. But anyways, there's tons of correlations. That's why books are so amazing. And one of the books that we're going to talk about today is 1984 by George Orwell. Very excited.
Yes, actually. And I just brought one of my favorite covers here. I have this weird habit. I don't know if I've told you about yet, Mirriam, but whenever I go to a bookstore or an old bookstore, whenever I'm in London or anywhere that I find it, I always look for old copies of this book and I buy them. So I have a collection of about 4 or 5 now. And, you know, once I set up my mailbox, I'm going to ask any subscribers, if you guys find a copy, an old copy of the book with a really interesting cover, buy it, send it to me. I will Venmo you the money for that because for whatever reason, yeah, Room 101. That's right. I did not realize Mike Brown. Please tell me, is it Room 101? Are you Mike Brown 101 because of that reference?
Good question.
Yeah, I wondered after I've been rereading the book. But yeah, it's well, first of all,
that would be trippy. So Catherine Spellino, who wrote The Bad Cadet, great book, by the way, everyone. It's out on Audible. I'm always going to give a shout out to my friend Catherine Spellino. She lived in dorm 101 at the Anthony Building, which was the first dormitory on the right of the lobby, and that was her room for many years. Anyways, interesting.
Yeah. I wouldn't know the reference. How did you first find out about 1984? Because you did not read it inside the church, I'm going to assume.
No, I didn't read the book inside the church, but I did come across references to it that Hubbard made in the policies and writings. Yeah. So I had heard and I'd read, you know, the title of the book many times, at least a few times, enough times for it to stand out in my memory. And I was a teenager, like a young teenager from 12 years old to 17 years old was when the bulk time of when I was reading the policies, those kind of more core policies. So yeah, it's definitely in there. And the time period correlates. And actually, 1984 was published right before Dianetics was published. I think they're about a year apart.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Is Dianetics published 1950? Do I have that right?
I think so. I think it's 1950. Yeah.
And then, right. So 1984 was published 1949.
Right.
George Orwell died 1950, died from tuberculosis from TB. I was just telling Sterling that last night I watched this whole documentary about George Orwell and I've written a ton of notes. And that's the only reason why I have these facts like fresh in my mind. I actually I've never done like a deep dive on George Orwell. I kind of only knew sort of like peripheral details. But yeah, so the first mentions of the book was in Hubbard's writing. And then it wasn't until many years after, I think I no longer considered myself a Scientologist by that stage, but very much I hadn't figured out a lot of things. And my impression when I was reading it was, actually, let's go back to you about when did you first come across it?
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, it's interesting because there were references made to it in Scientology quite a bit, but I don't remember there ever being a copy in the libraries wherever we were at, meaning the Scientology libraries. And I can understand why. It was always referred to as a communist, you know, it's referring to communism, essentially, in my understanding. But the description and why we decided to talk about this book is that it's so much like the Sea Org and Scientology experience. It's outrageous how close it is. And of course, it's not exactly the same. Yeah, there's a lot of different details, but you could take the general outline of that book and fit it into any Sea Org organization or even Scientology organization when it comes to editing what you can see as far as the media goes, when it comes to reporting, all these different things. But here's how I found out about it. Of course, I didn't go to a normal high school, which is, it's usually required reading in a normal high school, either 1984 or Animal Farm. You're going to read when you're going through high school.
Oh, interesting.
And I was out. I was working in Saudi Arabia, and I had reconnected with 2 very old friends of mine. It was Chiara Leserve and Laura Leserve, which are Guillaume Leserve's daughters.
That's right.
2 beautiful, beautiful human beings. They have a whole story themselves, which I would love to talk about sometime. I just want to get their permission before I do that. They had a very unique situation, like most people's, where they were able to get out at a younger age. So Chiara had read this book, and Chiara and I were very close. And she told me one time, she's like, she actually sent it to me as a gift, and she said, "You have to read this book, Sterling. It describes so much of the Sea Organization, everything else like that." And I was like, well, I was definitely out of Scientology, but I'm like, how could someone write a book that describes the Sea Organization? I mean, it's too weird. No one could have gotten that close to it. And I remember reading this and finishing it by the pool when I was in Saudi and just going, I can't believe it. I just cannot believe it describes so well. And actually the main character, Winston Smith, in the end, when he's being beaten and brainwashed and just, crushed, it so reminded me of my dad. There were so many instances in the book where it describes what he's going through. And I've seen my dad in that position, being yelled at, being beaten. And when I mean being beaten, I didn't physically ever see someone hit him, but he was beaten down. You could tell he lost the glimmer, the light. He was no longer confident. He was kind of cowed and shy. Now I have heard specifically the time Dave Miscavige kicked my dad, and I would love to get back at him for that, believe me. But you could just see the light leave my father's eyes, and my dad always had that light in his eyes, and it just, the whole Winston story just so tied into that. Anyway, so I'm forever thankful to Kiara LaServe for getting me that book and introducing me to it, because it was such an eye-opener. Even though I was slowly leaving Scientology, it was something that just kind of went, wow. Are you kidding me? It was explained so well. Yeah, so that's where I got it from. Now we're gonna go back to you, because you were going an interesting track there.
No, that was like, I was really feeling that, what you were saying. It's like, oof, I was feeling those hits. I was feeling those blows, because that was my experience when I first picked it up. It was so real. I did not read the whole thing the first time around. It was just way too real to me. And I think, I mean, that's incredible that you saw your father in that book. That's such a personal, like intimately personal experience. Ooh, wow. I feel yeah. So for me, first time I started reading it, and I did read a bit of it, and I was just like, it was just too real. It was too much.
It is.
I just couldn't.
It's hard to read, guys. It really is. It's a dark book. You can't just pick it up and read it and go, oh, this is going to be fun. But it's kind of, but it's
pretty incredible. Yeah. And I would say this next time around, reading it in preparation for our discussion, oh, wow, I really, really enjoyed it. So it was a completely different experience. It was still very dark at the beginning. Like the first few chapters are just real. I mean, the whole thing is dark. But there's some lightness. There is, like, there's some joyful moments sort of in the middle that were quite surprising, like kind of unexpected, and also beautiful. And then devastating, because anyways, I don't know if I'm sure many people have read it, so we could just say whatever is in it. But I was gonna say, so the aim of it is basically, it's this bringing awareness to totalitarian organizations. So whether that is, fascist organizations or communist organizations. And I think there's a crossover, because it's pretty clear that the Sea Organization was modeled on communism. Like that's pretty agreeable. And even fascism, really. Like if the state or the country was Scientology, if you just swap those words out, then it does take that form. And it was just like an incredible kind of like just sort of white knuckled kind of getting through it a bit in some parts, because it was pretty pretty jarring. Now it is more extreme.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I would say it's more extreme than what our experiences were.
Yes.
But certainly the psychological parts of it, and we can dive into specifics in that. But go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, so it's interesting, because like if you talk about the first couple chapters, which are really dark, a lot of it's the description of how run down London is and how beat up it is. And it's funny because Mike specifically, Brown, has talked about the pseudo Navy factor, the pseudo military factor. So whereas in 1984, you never really get that thrill except for the hate speech section. And I would equate the hate, the 2-minute hate stuff to like when we're at an event and they bring up the psychiatry stuff and we're all sitting there cheering because, 16 psych hospitals have been shut down in the last year. That is 20 patients that have not been assaulted because of your donations. Sorry, I hate that voice. So
that was very accurate.
Yeah, that was how they would talk about it, but that was their version of the hate speech. But even though, the Sea Org, we did have that esprit de corps that would happen from time to time, right? The satisfaction of being with a group of people, but it wasn't about the Sea Org. It was about those close friends that you had while you were there and accomplishing something, right? Working at something. But somehow that was always destroyed. That was always ruined by by some thought police person somewhere in that group, some mole would always ruin that camaraderie somehow and turn it back to dark. Now, a lot of the facilities in the Sea Org and Scientology are actually very nice looking facilities, so they don't correlate that way. But the birthing, on the other hand, absolutely. Where we slept was very 1984. I mean, if you guys ever got to look into the complex and the dormitories, or even where Rosemary Brown was, it's pretty horrific. Now, Golden Art Productions, since the time I left, they've renovated and they have beautiful new birthing buildings. But those took 25 years to build. And one of the thoughts I had when I left was like, God damn it, I wish I had been there. I always wanted to see how nice the rooms were going to be, but I was never in them. So it kind of sucked for me, right? It was like, oh, damn, that's a bummer. But you're right. It's not as dark, but the feeling is absolutely there. Yeah,
the feeling is there. I agree with that. The starkness of the description of where he was living. There was no personality there. There's nothing to recognize himself in that room except for this one secret diary or journal that he was beginning to keep. That was such a crime for him to even to have it in his possession. Just very stark. And what I would say is that probably now, as I imagine it, 1984, that like thought control, that policing, how you were saying how relationships were formed still, like I feel like there's probably less of that now, is the sense I get. Like I feel like it's moved to that more robotic state. I mean, but how would I know? I'm not there. That's just the sort of outside looking in, is the feeling that I get. It's more removed from the human feelings.
I've read Mitch Brisker's book, which is fantastic, and it is the most up-to-date book at a look inside Scientology, at least staff member wise. And yes, I would agree with you 100%. It's gotten very, very divided, very much a cliquey. And you're either at SMP. If you're not there, you're somewhere else. You're not as good. It's gotten very, and Dave's been that way for a long time. Dave Miscavige, he's been he has the people that are, and this is different, I think, than 1984. There's parts that are similar, that are different. And like, for instance, party members were allowed to do things that the proles and others couldn't. Well, in the case of 1984, all the party members were doing these things that were borderline unethical. Well, factually speaking, Dave Miscavige is the only party member in the Sea Organization and Scientology. He's the only one that gets the creature comforts. The only.
That's true.
And when I was reading that, I was like, oh, that's so interesting. How, Winston becomes close friends with the guy who has access to real sugar rather than, real coffee and all these things. Well, I always related that to, Dave Miscavige had access to everything. Now, the food we had wasn't horrible, and we had 3 square meals a day. But as Mark Headley's covered, the price of our meals was like 25 cents or something like that. Dave Miscavige is no joke, time to time, will get catered food from Nobu in Malibu, one of the most expensive restaurants in Los Angeles, brought to him, and multiple choices so he can pick through them. Meanwhile, the rest of the proles, relatively speaking, compared to each other, are eating crap, right? That's another thing that when I was reading the book, I'm like, yeah, look at that. Look at the difference between, what the person is. And of course, we don't have to get into it now. Dave is the guy. He had henchmen, he had people working with him for sure, but he's the guy that, he was, if you knew him, if you were near him, you felt it, because you knew he was the guy kind of turning all the knobs, essentially. He was
totally.
Yeah.
You know what was interesting? So yeah, so that wasn't there, the ability to have friendships, because we did have that. We had relationships and friendships. And I think that was mainly, I would say though, mainly that was between the younger population in the Sea Organization, because
Yep.
a lot of us knew each other, or we knew someone who knew someone, we'd heard their name. And so I think it was kind of impossible for that not to be there. Kids naturally are going to, want to bond with people, with their friends.
Yep.
And so again, I think that's another reason why that could be different now. And then I was going to say one thing that was interesting, like a sort of a contrast too, was that he's aware, like from the beginning, he's aware of his environment. Like he's very aware. He can see, he's telling you all the pieces and all the parts of it, whereas we weren't aware. Would you agree with that? Like we couldn't see. Yeah, we couldn't see all the parts of it. Like he knows where he's at. The only thing for him is like he doesn't know where anyone else is at, and that's where the danger lies. And so yeah, so that's interesting for me, because for me that was obviously it's not the same thing. It's just interesting to see where it contrasts.
See, I didn't think of that. I think that's brilliant, Mirriam. I really didn't think you're right. He knew all the pieces that were put together. The only thing he couldn't grasp was who he could talk to, who he was not afraid of talking to. When he strikes up the relationship with the lady, I think it's Julia. He can't stand her at first because she looks like a card carrying member. She's pulling the line and just marching in step, goose stepping with everybody.
He has homicidal tendencies towards her.
Yeah, and he tells her that. And it's funny because he does, and he even questions. And I don't know if you remember this, but I remember going every once in a while because look at, as the trees I see, as the pool I see, and I was in an executive position for a very short amount of time. Once I did realize this, I was like, I would look at all these executives, these WDC members, and these executive strata members, the kind of the top end managers, and forgive us guys, we're not going to explain that in detail, but we're just talking about the top managers at international base. And I was always wondering, I wonder which one of you is going next. Which one of you really does not like the treatment and the behavior of Dave Miscavige? Which one of you is going to speak up, and which one of you is going to be down here? And I'm going to be told to, keep an eye on you if I'm doing my trees and you see them, just make sure, they don't try to jump the fence or something along that line. I always was wondering what's going on in people's heads, because as you got a little further along, as you started to see the behavior specifically from Dave, because that's what I can relate to, because I saw his behavior. You begin to wonder, like, who's going to stick around that long? Who's got it? Who's I don't want to say tough, because it's not tough. It's who's brainwashed enough to put up with the shit that Dave puts out, Yeah, and it always related that way. Now, there's not a character, I guess, other than Big Brother, there's not a character in 1984 that's David Miscavige.
A living character, or like we don't. It seems like Big Brother is not an actual person. Yeah.
Right. But he would be, Dave Miscavige would be the de facto leader of the thought police as a child, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's how he was.
So that's interesting. So you began to become aware of it towards like the later part, and me and I as well. So this is interesting, is when I made the decision, it was like that fuck it moment, like fuck it. And that's in here. He's like, I'm dead anyways. So he was like, he realized like, I'm dead anyways. Like, I'm just going to do it. Like, fuck it. Right. And so I had that moment too, where I was like, okay, I'm just going to jump. And that
where were you when that happened?
I was in Los Angeles. I was working for ASHO, the American St. Hill Organization. Okay. And I think I had that in smaller versions, but the biggest fuck it moment was when I was on the RPF in England. And I was like, that's it. Like, there's no turning back. There was that was it. It was over. And I knew that was real then. And you were done with it.
What was your, and this is related to the book, because there is a point where you get turned, and we'll come back to the relationship between Julia and Winston and the sex factor, because there's an interesting little correlation to that and relationships inside the Sea Organization.
Yeah.
But And it's interesting you say there's that turning point, and I wonder, Mirriam, I wonder if it's because of our generation that we were different than our parents in that regard. Because I look at my father, and he's an extremely smart individual, like brilliant individual, problem solver, go-getter, all these things. But he'll take the abuse. He will take it. He will be put on a job way beneath his skill level and just toil there for the rest of his life and somehow be happy with it. Whereas I had that cutoff point, and I don't know where that came from. I was never going to do the RPF, like never. Like I was like, guys, the second you try to send me the RPF, I'm out. I just had that. And I don't know where it came from. Maybe it was from growing up as a child and seeing these people running around with their armbands on people that I knew that were friends of my parents, and seeing them be punished for something that I didn't really understand. I mean, it's a pretty dark image to see someone wearing all black and running everywhere. There's something about that gets into a kid's psyche, I think, that I couldn't understand, because then on the other hand, I had my parents who were kind of happy-go-lucky, nice people, upbeat, very kind to me, tried to do everything they could. And then I see these people running around in black uniforms. And I just had that cutoff point. I'm like, I'm never doing that. Not even one. You can't make me do that. I would never do that. And I like running. I mean, I do. But I would never do it. So that's interesting. You were on the RPF, though. How long were you on the RPF?
4 months. And you know what's interesting is like I would the whole time I was working in that organization, I was I was terrified of the RPF. Like the RPF was my room 101 in my mind. Like it was like I just it was just very but I did end up there.
I know, and I'm sorry.
I felt no, I almost felt like there was this inevitable thing. Like when it happened, I was like, oh yeah. Or like just before I got placed in the RPF, when I was like, when I was doing the thing that placed me there, I was like, yeah, it makes sense. Like it's inevitable. I just felt like this is something that was weighing over me for years. And I was just like, yeah, that's where I knew it was going to happen. And I was like, I think it was just another one of those fuck it moments. Like, okay, I'm going to be dead either way. So just jump. And I did. And then it was the next day I was on the RPF, because they pulled me in for, they put me on the E-meter the next day and asked me, what did I do? Yeah. So I did a bad thing.
Did you ever have that thought? So one of the parts of the book too, which is interesting, is Winston describes seeing these older people that kind of had disappeared. That's another thing about the 1984. It's the people that disappear in the Sea Organization. Maybe not in Scientology, maybe not a Scientology org, and that's not belittling anyone's experience in a Scientology organization, but in the Sea Org, people would just disappear. It was weird. That is why the Shelley Miscavige thing has so much traction. In some cases, you're right. Who cares about the wife of the leader who also was an abuser and did different things? She meant something to some people, but it was one of those things about the Sea Organization. People would just disappear, and the next time you would see them, they would be washing dishes or on the decks. And they described that in 1984. That was something. That was another. And I love, what do you call it? The fuck you moments, or sorry,
the fuck it moment.
Fuck it moment.
Like,
I
fuck
love
it.
that. Okay.
Yeah,
fuck it. One of mine was that I saw all these older Sea Org members that had been on the Apollo, that had worked with L. Ron Hubbard, that were OT3 or above, washing dishes, working in the grounds department, doing some sort of menial labor. And I'm doing the math. I'm like, okay, so I'm 25. Dave Miscavige does not like me already, so that's never going to be fixed. Dave Miscavige doesn't forgive anybody. So I'm sitting here toiling away. I'm happy if I can just do my work and people just stay out of my way and I can do my work. But once that started crowding in, the thought crept in, well, look at this guy. He's 60 years old, 70 years old. He's washing dishes. There's no way I'm doing that. There is just no way that's how the end of my life's going to be. I'm just not doing that. And realize at that point, I didn't know how good life could be. I hadn't traveled anywhere. I didn't know what it was like to have freedom, to have my weeknights. I didn't know what it was like to play, baseball anytime I wanted to, watch baseball anytime I wanted to. I had spend time with my family and my non-Scientology family. I didn't know these things. That was not a driving thing. income, money wasn't a driving thing. What was that I'm not going to end up at 60 washing dishes, in the galley, or scrubbing pots, or washing floors, or doing some menial labor because someone in that church didn't like me. And I don't know where that came from, and I don't know if anyone else had that experience, but for me, I was like, fuck it, not happening. So those things all kind of built up, obviously, as the end came closer and closer. And they tried to keep me. They deny this always. They're always saying we threw them out. No, they worked so hard to not let me go. But I think that was mostly because of my parents. They didn't want me to give, or more specifically, my mom, Biddy. They didn't want me to go to her and give her the information about what was happening for the past, 4 or 5 years after she left. But yeah, that was one of my fucking moments. Where did you go when you left? Because you didn't have, your parents weren't, again. To be clear with everyone, I actually worked with Mirriam's mom for 4 years. And I spoke to Liz last night, and I worked around her dad, but knew her dad pretty well for about 10 years. Your mom, I worked with for 4 years. I found her to be, she was nice to everybody. Let's put it that way. I'm sorry that what happened to you, and she didn't, even though she did divorce your father, you'd only hope she would have done more, right? But
here's my thing. Let me oh, sorry, no, you finished.
No, you please go.
I'm gonna let you finish. No, I'm joking. No, no, I mean, it's interesting. I've heard that a lot, this cheerful expression. I'll say 2 things to that. I'll say there's nice and there's kind. And what I teach my children, I say, don't care about nice, care about being kind. And there are nuances to that. Nice is like, you could be just, I don't know, you could be roadkill and have a smile on your face. You're being run over every day. Like, I don't know. That's she's not effective in anything. She can't control anything in her environment. She has no say in her, what happens to her children. Her children are just constant collateral damage. Still to this day, even though we're grown adults now and we can look after ourselves, she has no connection to the outside world, or very limited connection to the outside world. I just think she's nice. She has a smile on her face, but what does that mean? That's not, for me, that's not kindness. That's not anything that holds water for me. That's not anything. That's not a display of a real human characteristic that I can, really connect with. And so I really encourage people, don't be nice, be kind. And that's my message. And I also wanted to say,
Mirriam, I love that. I love that. Yeah. And I'm going to specify, because I think that is a great distinction. I really do. Let me specify just more what I meant, because I put it in broad strokes. When it became the norm to attack, and this is not related to you, absolutely not related to you. I understand that mother-daughter relationship and the responsibility she should have had for taking care of you. So this doesn't erase that. This is going to clarify what I meant by that. In an environment where it was attack, dog eat dog, shit on everybody, she never participated in that. So she gets a -0.5 point for that, but not in regards to being your mother at all. Let's just say that's completely staff member related, because a lot of people did jump on that, did include themselves in that, and were nasty to people and destroyed people that they didn't have to. But again,
I think also, and I also think it speaks to her role as well. Like she was, but then you'll know more. You're going to be way more, knowledgeable about how it was up there. I never worked up there, but she was passionate about art, and she was passionate about defeating psychiatry, and those 2 things were the drivers. I don't even think that that was it for her. It was like defeating psychiatry. It was just like this burning fire in her, and so everything else made sense because of that. Right. But I also wanted to say, in this book, he also talks about kind of fixing this mask, fixing this demeanor on your face, which is a kind of pleasant demeanor that is not going to basically draw attention, that you're not going to show any disagreement or discontentedness. And so he would always kind of adjust this kind of facial expression that he had. There's that too. I think that kind of can correlate. I think that was her go-to. It's like I've had conversations with her that were kind of horrific in the things that she would say. but
Yep.
she did it with a smile on her face. Like she just,
Interesting.
it was like this slap happy. That's what I'm saying. It's like I get it. So many people have told me like, oh, your mom was always so cheerful. It's like, yeah, she was always, she didn't stop. Like she never stopped, even in times in conversation where it wasn't appropriate. She was just like super positive. It's like,
It's interesting that you point that out,
yeah.
because that's actually true. Because I can't remember a time when she wasn't like that, and it was almost to a point of a psychosis. It wasn't totally real.
It's not real.
No, and again, I'm explaining again. So you were be clear. No part of what I'm saying is negating your experience with her. We're sharing memories and we're talking through that. And it does fascinate me because even you mentioned that. And let's go back to 1984 when they're clapping and East Asia is being collapsed. And I don't know if you remember that, but part of that was when we were at an L. Ron Hubbard tape play or a COB briefing, Dave Miscavige briefing, you had to put that face on. You had to be like, oh yes, I approve. Yes, clapping enthusiastically, and it was insane. Because sometimes you were just like, I don't want to have any part with that. It's stupid. It doesn't sound right. But you had to put on that face and always be, pro party, right? Like everything that makes sense, even if it doesn't totally make sense. I'm not trying to change the subject from your mom, and I want to make sure that you get to finish your statement on that. But it's just part of that thing that was crazy about being there is it's almost the fake enthusiasm you had to throw out at things. Even when down, sometimes you went, really? Like, really? That doesn't totally make sense. And it's so interesting that the human psyche can have those, the information, and they can justify, again, this part's not about your mom. This is just in general of us being in the Sea Organization, but you can somehow, I mean, the amount of things we did end up seeing things that we justified in our mind. And we're not talking about abuses. We're just talking about information about Scientology that we're like, well, that doesn't really make sense. I've never seen someone come back from a past life, and I've heard people say it, but I mean, did we ever see a baby, at age 2 read
OT powers?
Yeah, right. Never. No, wait, did we ever see OT powers? No,
but like that's interesting, Sterling. See, I didn't go I didn't go as far as that in my questioning, and so maybe see, because when you were talking about I don't so going back to when you were talking about how you saw things, things about David Miscavige, and you saw things where you were like, okay, when's the next person going to be knocked down and be punished or disappear or whatever. And what's interesting is that, like, when we began this, I was saying that this character could see it so clearly and I could not. But it's interesting, you began to see things more clearly. But then again, there's a difference there. I think you were older when you left compared to me, so you had more time in there. I left the Sea Organization when I was 17 years old, and you were how old?
Yeah, I was 29. So no, you're completely right.
Wow.
And don't forget, I was watching Dave do these things. So imagine if you're
in person.
If you're in LA and you see one of your seniors being abusive, like Aaron's talked about, you go, oh, it must not be like that up at Gold or Int.
Yes. Yeah.
I was seeing the head of Scientology do these things, so I was questioning that. No, I'm not perfect, guys. It took me a while to get there. So let's make sure I'm not saying I knew it all while it was happening. Not at all. I just wasn't willing to participate in a lot of it because I just didn't. I've never been one that can hurt someone and just watch it happen. It's something about injustice boils my blood. And I've gotten my hand slapped several times for standing up for people when people don't understand why. And it might not even be a correct mannerism that I have, but it is something that just bugs me when someone's accused of something they didn't do. I can't take it. I have to say something about it. But yes, no, I agree. You're 17. I mean, you're like the fact you left at 17 is amazing, and bravo to anyone that was able to leave at that age. I wish so much that I had left at that age. That was right in the thick of me. I believe when I was 17, I was probably the pool IC. Washing pools and cleaning out the pond and picking up peacock shit. So different experience, but yes, I agree.
Yeah, and the thing is for me, don't get too excited yet because 17 I left and I was, I was ignorant because I didn't receive an education. I was born and raised in this thing, and when I left, I was placed in the home of a Scientology family, and it was in a remote location, which I didn't know. I thought I was going to be living in Melbourne, a city that I would have opportunity to, find work straight away and to get on my feet and start earning an income. And that where I which they didn't explain to me, of course, was about an hour and 45 minutes away from the city. And there was no work. It was in the middle of winter. It was a tourist town. There was just no work available. And so the family was like, oh, okay, well, we'll do you a favor. I mean, that's how it was put to me. In hindsight, I'm like, oh my, this was actually, it's kind of dark. But I like, it's like in one way, I mean, I was so grateful for so long. I was like, oh, at least they gave me a roof over my head. But now looking back at it, I'm like, okay, so they provide me. I was like living and working in the same location, which back then I didn't understand about human trafficking. I was living and working and I was just, again, I was grateful for a roof over my head. I was grateful that I was able to survive, that I wasn't homeless on the streets. So now I'm talking about it from a perspective of living I would believe is a more privileged lifestyle where I'm not worried about where my next meal is going to come from. That's when I came out of the Sea Organization, I was worried how I would feed myself in a couple months' time. Like next month, where will I be? How will I survive? So I was just so grateful, and I didn't question anything. But they paid me as minimally as I'm sure that they possibly could. And in fact, a relative of theirs said, "Hey, Mirriam's not 18 yet. She could do." There's actually, I didn't even know about it at the time, but there was a government subsidy that would support you going back to study. Like they would give you an income to go to school. And of course, I didn't know about that. They knew about it, but I didn't. And so the relative of theirs was like, I remember hearing part of the conversation. She's like, Mirriam could go back, she could go and study. And the person that was like I was being kept under was like, no, we don't do that. It was something along those lines. Like, no, that's not what's happening. It's like Mirriam has to be responsible for her own survival and all this stuff. Anyways, so yeah, that's there's a whole chain of conversation there. But to get back on track, what I wanted to do is I wanted to come back to, because so this spirit in us, that's like this rebellious spirit that I recognize in you, I recognize that in myself. And because I was not someone that conformed or followed the rules, I always had trouble following the rules while I was in there and growing up in there. Catherine as well, who wrote The Bad Cadet, who I mentioned earlier, she was also, she was loud, she was boisterous, she was always getting in trouble for being, just for not falling into line and not conforming and not being a certain way. And so, and so I see that spirit in us, and I think that that's what got us through, and that's what got us out. And there's one section here that I wanted to read. Okay, so here's this, right? Okay, this is chapter 7, and this is him. I think he's writing in his diary. And it says, until they become conscious, they will never rebel. Until after they have rebelled, they cannot become conscious.
Wow.
So I think that's really important because it's like, it's this vicious cycle of you kind of have to do one before the other. Like, and how can you do that? So, we had that rebellious spirit. I think that helped us to get there, to get out.
I do too.
And then, and I think also it's a slow process, like small acts of rebellion. I think the same thing for if you're in an abusive relationship, small acts of rebellion. It's like, that's how you're in a high control group, is to just do one thing, like one little thing, just that one little thing. What are you brave enough to do? Right. And then the next thing is like, okay, what am I brave enough to do next? Because to think of just leaving is too overwhelming. I couldn't do that straight away. Even when I wanted to leave, I was conscious of wanting to leave, but it was still scary, overwhelming. So what's your thoughts on that?
Oh, no, I mean, absolutely. It's kind of funny because it's a prison of belief, right? I mean, so many people have talked about that because the fact of the matter is, in most cases, you could have just walked off anytime you wanted to. There would be
Truth.
someone to try to stop you, but I think they learned somewhere along the lines that physical restraint was no longer going to work. I don't know when that happened, but maybe it had something to do with the FBI raid in the 70s after the biggest infiltration of the U.S. government in the history of the U.S. government by the Church of Scientology. But it's interesting.
Well, Sterling,
let me say
this one point. The ones that they believed were a risk, they put them in a room and they had them under 24-hour guards.
Yes.
The ones that they were at risk of blowing or who had blown, you would get that extra sort of like prison guard treatment, the physical prison guard treatment. But for the rest of them, well, they didn't need to. And the one time that there was one time that I physically left the base. There was been a couple of times, but this one particular time, and LAPD took me and then placed me. Well, not straight away because that's a whole story, but they kept me, they like handcuffed me, took me to the station. I was there for a few hours. They then put me in an overnight foster home. And then an official from my organization, the one that I was working at the time, came and collected me and brought me back.
Oh God.
But yeah, sorry, I interrupted you. Please keep going.
No, it's okay. Yeah. So to clarify, here's two ways it goes. It's funny how in such a 1984 environment, but there are times when being in the Sea Organization and Scientologists, you're kind of honest. So you're like, hey, I want to leave. The second you say that, you're under watch. Now you can, if you give no hint at all to wanting to leave, you can walk out of there. But if they get you back, you're under 24-hour watch and you're going to have a hard time getting a second chance. You always have a good chance the first time. It's the second time that you're going to have a hard time getting out. And that's just the fact of the matter, right? It's always the second time where they're going to nail you. So when you came back, they were watching you, right? They were watching you for sure. Now, again, Blue Complex doesn't have fences. Golden Hour Production had fences.
Does.
You had to convince security to open a gate somewhere to get out. But it's interesting because once you get out in Big Blue, PAC, Pacific Area Command, LA, you could take a bus or a car, but where'd you have to go? You were 17, right? I mean, even me, I didn't have a car. I had a license, but what was I going to do? Walk through Hemet, California, San Jacinto for 20 miles. So I found the next city. It's interesting. That's all I got to say about that.
It's not practical. Yeah, it's not practical. Like to answer your question, no, of course I had nowhere to go. Both my parents were in the church, both worked for the church. And in fact, my mother was at the Gold Base, which is where you were, and my father at the time was in England. And I was actually the only member of my family in Los Angeles because both of my brothers were at Flag in Florida. Okay. So I was very much on my own, and no one outside. Like my whole family is in Australia. So I didn't have any, no open arms to run to, that's for sure. So it was always that thing of like, I could leave, but I would have nowhere to go. And my thought was, okay, well, here's the thing, because it was so difficult for me to say that I wanted to leave, and for it to be not only that, because I had said I wanted to leave, they busted me down to a cleaner. And then they just kept me there. This is while I was working for the organization. And eventually I was like, the only way they're going to take me seriously and actually let me do this proper routing out, which is what I would need to do in order to get connected with somebody on the outside to live with.
And possibly speak to your parents ever again, which is a thought that probably goes through your mind, right? At least your mom, right?
Very much. Yeah. And especially my brothers, my two brothers.
Right. You'd lose them for sure if you didn't do it the right way. Yeah,
exactly. So I was like, okay, but I need them to know that I really actually do want to leave, so that they don't just keep me here as a cleaner indefinitely. So I escaped in the night, and the idea was like I knew I had nowhere to go. I just knew that I had to be out long enough that they would take it seriously, and so that's what did happen. So I was successful in that. But yeah, there was nowhere in the outside for me to go. And I also had I had so limited knowledge about the outside, I wouldn't even know the first step of how, I mean, I'd barely even been in a car, I'd never driven one, but I'd barely even been in a car because we were always chauffeured around with, the school bus, like to the ranch, back in those days and stuff. And in Los Angeles, I didn't go anywhere. I was just like, you would maybe walk to Rite Aid on CSP time.
Yeah, and that was part of the gig. That was part of the control factor, I think. They really they didn't promote getting your driver's license or doing anything like that. They really it was all part of the control factor. But that's so it's,
Mm.
look, you talked about being put as a cleaner, or
Mhm.
as they like to call it, sanitation engineer, to make it sound
Yeah.
more sophisticated. It's something I'm going to do with Mike Brown in the near future. I found in the OSA files a list of ex-gold or int-based staff that are
Yes.
now in the LA area. And it's
Yes.
kind of unbelievable to think that there's a list of something like 150 people that used to be at int that are now down in LA. They're working their butts off. They're still there. They're still part of the church. They're still trying to do a good job, but they're on this
Mhm.
shit list, essentially. And OSA's talking about how we should make sure they're all doing menial labor, how they're doing nothing important. Don't put them on any lines that are important. Keep them away from COB's view, all this stuff. I'm like, are you joking? You're talking about people that have dedicated 30 years of their lives to your mission, to your cult, and you're talking
Mhm.
about them in that fashion, like
Yeah.
there's some criminal off the street that tried to rob you. It's unbelievable to me. It's just another facet that doesn't really apply to this conversation, but it does
No, it
work into
does.
my.
It really does.
Yeah,
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 it's a high control. And reading through those OSA documents, by the way, was a massive turning point for me. And it's incredible that there was still layers. Like I was reading these at the end of last year.
yeah,
We're talking like a few months ago. That's crazy, right?
yeah.
Um, I'm, it could have been like November, December, around that period, maybe November. That's probably maybe the earliest. I mean, I'd have to, look up when I actually received them, but it was really, really recent. And for some reason, and I know about all the reporting and all the internal stuff like that, but I never knew that there was just like this constant list that was being monitored, because it appears in the OSA documents several times. There's a few different versions, but they were really monitoring these people, who they were connected with, what they were doing, updates, like check who this person, what's the situation with this person. That was the moment that I knew, like beyond a doubt, 100,000%,
Yeah.
that it would have been like, I already knew that it was known about. I had enough on that. Like, but the fact that it wouldn't have just been one report, that's where it came through to me. It's like, oh, it wouldn't have just been a one-off report in 1997 or in 1998 when this happened, or in 2001 when this happened, or in 2002 when this happened. Because I had these different time periods where sort of pinnacle things that I was aware of happened that it would have been reported.
Yes.
But now when we see an ongoing list, I'm like, oh, yeah, he was on a list. And I know that, well, it rings true to me because in 2002, so my father at that time was working at St. Hill in England, and David Miscavige was about to come out for the IAS event, which he always does. And I think it's sometime between it's towards the end of the year.
It's October.
So
It's always October, between
yeah,
October
October,
6th and like 15th. Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful. So coming up to October 2002, and David Miscavige was coming out to do the event. There's people that go before him to like give him an all clear, like to check that things are, and that's
Yep.
OSA. OSA actually does that's an OSA activity to check that all the things, there's no legal risk, there's no da 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 da. And at that time, my father's immediate boss said to him, right, like this was her order, like, you need to get out of here before David Miscavige arrives.
Wow.
And so when I saw these lists,
which means Dave Miscavige knew about it.
which
That's
means David
evidence
Miscavige
that
would have
Yep.
at least known his name.
Yep.
Or whoever was managing the legal risk for David Miscavige 100% knew
Right.
what my father had done and who he was. And so
Scientology's
that became
obsession
clear.
with keeping records, filing reports, and talking about everything in writing is going to be their
Mhm.
downfall. It really
Yes.
is. It's unbelievable. But it is also, like you say, it's like they're so small
Mhm.
that they have to keep everyone around, even if they don't like them. The list of people Dave Miscavige doesn't like is more than the list of Sea Org members that exist today. I mean,
Yeah.
seriously.
Yeah.
Guys, and I'm not just picking on David Miscavige. He is the top. He's the guy that sets the tone for everything. It does not mean that people underneath him aren't guilty for doing things. He had henchmen. Absolutely had henchmen. Marty Rathbun, Mike Rinder was also a henchman of David Miscavige. Mike Sutter, Warren McShane. There's a lot. Those would be
Kurt
the four
Weiland.
main people, though, for sure.
Kurt Weiland was up there too. With
Yeah,
OSA.
that's right. Kurt Weiland, who was actually the minister at my wedding.
Oh, that's okay. You didn't know.
I had never met him before. I don't even know how he got the job. Maybe he knew. I don't know. I don't know how he got the job. But anyways, you know what? I think
did you spend much time around him at all, or
no? So I got married. I got married 3 times in 2 days.
Wow.
I got married in Vegas because I was 19 and Suzette was 17. I got married at Golden Era Productions, which Dave and Shelley went to, and then that was the same day, Vegas and in Golden Era Productions, and then the next day I got married at Celebrity Center, and that's where Kurt Weiland was the MC or whatever, the minister. But guess what? I had never met Kurt Weiland before that, so I don't know why he was the minister. Maybe Shelley asked. I don't know why. But anyways,
amazing. So I was saying wow because I'm like, yeah, Celebrity Center, to have a Celebrity Center wedding. So get this, like, because if you had a wedding at Celebrity Center, usually what it was for is to invite people, family members who were not Scientologists, so that they can come to a beautiful environment, and it's just like the gardens are just beautiful. And but for us, like just like regular Joes, when we got married, it was super, super basic. I mean, I never got married when I was in, but what would happen is you'd get married in like Lebanon Hall, or what was nicer was the courtyard, which was renovated later on outside of Asho, back of Asho. Yeah, right. But yeah, usually it was like Lebanon Hall. Luckily, they did renovate that later on, but yeah, it was pretty.
I'm going to assume mine was a big ordeal only because my wife was the half sister of Shelley, and Biddy was my mom, and we had to have But that's funny because we didn't have to have a wedding in LA. The only reason we had a wedding in LA was because my dad's family was there,
right? Yeah,
and that was for them. That was all for them, and they all showed up to it. And it was kind of, my dad actually paid for the wedding. It was expensive. It was somewhere in the order of like $8,000. I know that doesn't sound expensive to anyone else, but when you're a Sea Org member, that's expensive. My dad had gotten, he'd gotten some money. But anyways, to me, I was like, after the first one, I was done. I just wanted to, as you can imagine, get to the bedroom as quickly as possible. And I do remember my dad even inviting me.
Wow, Sterling. I did not know that.
I was like, hey, seriously. Okay. But it's funny because I only dated my wife for like maybe 2 months. Yeah. And I proposed to her at the bottom of the slope in Big Bear on Christmas. And then I think we'd spent a total of 6 hours together before we proposed, because as we've discussed in many lives, inside the Sea Organization, you cannot have sex until you're married. So you kind of rush things a little bit at that point. But yeah.
Well, as I said, I was watching this documentary about George Orwell. His real name was Eric Blair. And I just wanted to mention Eric Blair. Yeah. And he met his beautiful wife. They were together for a long time. It was a really beautiful relationship. And now just checking my notes, but he proposed to her after a few days of meeting her. And here we go. Her name was Eileen, and he proposed after a few days. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Desperate, huh?
Yeah. Really beautiful relationship. And it lasted for a long time too. So there's,
hey, you know what? Love at first sight. I don't think that was the case. Suzette was my second choice. My first choice was a lovely lady named Serena McKelvin. And that's a whole story I can get into why that wasn't allowed to happen. That really sucked for me. I was kind of bummed about that. It had to do with our organizations, where we were at, and getting the approval. I don't know if you remember this, but you usually had to get the approval of your commanding officer or senior in the organization to get married. But you weren't married when you were there, so you might not know that. But
no.
Yeah.
But I do know that I do know that for higher orgs, like I was like I wasn't even in a management organization. But in this book, 1984, couples had to get approval from a committee in order to get married.
Yeah.
So that is another correlation. And the other thing was, and I don't know if we have time for this today, but there's the whole like anti-sex, anti-pleasure part.
Let's save that for the second one, because the quote I have on my screen applies to that, and it's so interesting because, and we'll leave you with this little teaser. In the Sea Organization, specifically Dave Miscavige, and I heard it from Shelley's mouth herself, had an issue with couples because he knew that the love and connection of a couple would outweigh the control factor of the church. So that's why the church spent so much time separating people and keeping them away from each other. Perfect example is my sister Jenna's story with her husband Dallas. When she was leaving, they tried to split them up because they know that couple, the power of the couple will outweigh the influence of the church in some cases. And they were afraid of that. But that's something we should cover in a whole nother subject. I think we really should do that. That'd be fun. That'd be fun.
For sure. So they didn't want anything which would affect the loyalty of their members.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's the same side in the book. The other topic that I know we're going to jump off in 1 minute, but I do want to, another part of this that I want to dive into, and we can talk about Eric Blair or George Orwell's life, is that there's a few, it's going to be a whole nother topic. But what I wanted to sort of just lead in with is that he actually, when he was 8 years old, he was sent to a boarding school. And he was subjected to punishments on a daily basis. He was beat on a daily basis because he had a problem with wetting. From the first night he arrived, he began to wet the bed. And I'm sure that's like stress trauma related. He's just been taken from his family's home, and he's 8 years old, and he's placed in this strange, place. Begins to wet the bed. He wets the bed nightly. Every morning his bed is checked, and he's taken to like the person in charge, and is beaten. So so he had, and I just want to talk more about like, his personality, his striving for justice and truth and asking questions, and anyways, but we can do that that's so much more to come. We've got so much more to discuss. We've only just
absolutely.
I feel like,
Tip
this is kind of like chapter 1.
Yeah, this is an iceberg. There's so much more underneath because the correlation is so interesting, and I agree. And I definitely want to get into the sex and relationship thing, because that was a whole nother thing that's kind of crazy. But you know what? If it's okay with you, Mirriam, if you got a little extra time, I want to pop through a couple questions and comments that people made,
perfect.
and then we'll bounce out from there. Let me pull some up here real quickly. Okay, awesome. First of all. Mike Brown, waiting on you, Turbo. I don't know how I got the nickname Turbo, but I kind of like it. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike, for being there. Look, complimenting people is something I enjoy doing, but I got to say one thing about Mike Brown, and I'm sure you've experienced this in talking with him, Mirriam. That guy's a class act. There's no question about it. He has been my friend for the longest time. My only regret is the 10 or 15 years where I didn't even know he still existed. I wish we had been in touch, and I could have spent more time with him. Mike Brown's a stand-up guy. I love you, Mike. You're amazing.
I agree.
An insult to all the nerds. Yes, it was a joke about Star Wars and Mirriam's channel. I've been saving that one up. I thought it would be so funny. So yes, I do know it's Harry Potter. I'm a giant Harry Potter fan. I've been to the London studios.
Oh, wow.
Another subject we'll have to cover sometime is when the basics first came out, people were reading Harry Potter a little bit before, and Dave got pissed off because they considered it out ethics for people to be reading Harry Potter. They should all be reading Scientology books, not Harry Potter, which is kind of why I don't read fiction, but I read Harry Potter when I left, because I was like, you can go fuck yourself. I'm reading because you said not to.
It's crazy.
All right, and then Tazzy D, thank you so much. Yes, I know it was Harry Potter. Block A Read. I was about to say, Sterling, no, you didn't. Yes, I did, Block A Read. I did absolutely, and I did it intentionally. Blake Reed again. I don't know if Mirriam, do you know of Blake Reed? He is a regular.
I think I've seen him pop up. Yeah.
Amazing guy. Love him. Sterling,
is that Block A?
Yeah, well, I say Block A just because of
I know.
Aaron.
Aaron.
Sterling, I was going to run this by you next time I caught a live. You should cosplay as Kyle Katarn for one Thanksgiving. You would. I don't even know who that is.
I don't know who that is either.
I'm gonna have to check that out. I'm gonna have to check that. You know, I dress up on Thanksgiving sometimes. I don't know if did I tell you that story yet, Mirriam?
No, I'm
We have so
unfamiliar
much
with
good
this.
content to do together. We have so much good content. I'd hate dressing up at Halloween. I'll dress up at Thanksgiving. It's a weird thing I have.
I'm in. Yeah.
I'll send you pictures tonight. Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Corona. Guess LRH took it as a manual instead of a warning. 1984.
Yeah, it's a guide. Yeah. It's a guide for him. I know, and that's the thing. And so it was, Sharona, you are correct. It was intended as a warning. Yes, from George Orwell, aka Eric Blair. Yes, and it actually, so he wrote this in his final years. It was published 1 year before he died. And yeah, I mean, it's amazing. When we get into a bit more about his life, you'll see all the correlations. And this was obviously just such an incredibly meaningful piece of work for him. Artistically done, amazingly done, just absolutely incredible.
Yes, I agree. And, you know, by the way, I have been to his house in Notting Hill several times. Not inside it, but it has a plaque. I don't know if you know this, in London, they put plaques on historical sites.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was always thrilled to walk by that. I think I even have a picture in front of it. But I also took a picture in front of Sherlock Holmes's, you know, fake address. That was as exciting for me. So I'm a nerd. Okay.
I love it. No, I am too. I'm into it. I'm into it. Yeah.
The RPF is like Room 101. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's the entire purpose of it.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah.
Atkins in Texas, another one of my favorites, especially dark if you feel you've lived some of it. And this is in reference to 1984. Yeah. Yes. I think so.
Very much.
I think so. It's like, you know, it was tough for me to read it again now that we talk about this on a regular basis. But it's not an easy thing. It's a dark book for sure. I agree. I agree.
One of the things that we didn't get into, which maybe we can get into a whole theorizing next time, is who we think in correlation to our stories, who the proles are. So you were kind of mentioning it as like they were like the lower down, you know, the lower organizations. I was viewing it as in some ways that he talked about it as like just the public Scientologists, and in some ways that he talked about it, I thought about it in a way of being the people who were never in the people outside of the whole realm of Scientology.
So a WOG.
Right. Yeah. So one of the things that he said is he said about the proles, he said that they are not human, like basically that they're not human beings or something like that. So there was no humanity.
Right. He did say that.
The proles are not human beings. And so that's where I was like, okay, maybe it's like, yeah. So I was just trying to, anyways, it's interesting correlations, but it's one of the things that he was saying was that, and sorry, we'll get back to the questions, but one of the things that he was saying is that the power is with the proles. So the power is with the people, basically. Yep. And at any stage, if you can all recognize your power, you can overthrow this totalitarian organization. I think we're starting to see that with these like First Amendment audits, people standing out in front of these organizations. I think that's part of that awakening and actually engaging in physical interactions, which is something that Eric, that's something that he actually promoted as well. Anyways, that's a whole nother thing. That's sort of his like
absolutely
biography. Yeah.
And it's also interesting because you can take from that really, and I know it would be hard because of the legal structure of Scientology, but also from internally from Scientology, Sea Org members, you could take control of that group and oust David Miscavige if you really wanted to. It would take a lot of balls. Wouldn't be easy.
But you're right.
But if a few key people along the line said, "We're not listening to you. You're full of it," you could you could just remove his power in an instant. Believe it or not, he really. I mean, you cannot sick the police on someone that just said no to you. So if everyone just agreed he didn't have power, that would kind of be the end of it for him. Now I know he's like Kim Jong-un and he's the North Korean leader and stuff, so that's kind of a hard thought to imagine, but there were instances in the 80s and the early 90s where that could have been affected, but it wasn't.
Let me tell you a funny side story to that is that So basically at the time was when there was sort of like that battle for the IRS tax exemption. Jerry Armstrong was involved with I think providing information to them, to the officials and whatever. I don't know the whole story. I'm not an expert on this matter, but at that time, actually, Mike Rinder had like in disguise or whatever, basically set up, they both were wearing like glasses and whatever, and they met up in this park and they set up this meeting, and Mike Rinder was pretending, and it's in his book, actually, it's detailed in his book, but there is also a YouTube video of this if anyone wants to look it up. But basically Mike Rinder was pretending, this was like his op was to pretend that he was part of this inside group called the Loyalists. And the Loyalists were basically working together to overthrow the current regime. And they were going to take over Scientology and create this better and improved Scientology. And so Mike Rinder he's posing as like like a member of this Loyalist party and talking to Jerry Armstrong under this pretense. And it's just wild. So yeah, I mean, it was not true, but you know, when you're watching Jerry Armstrong and he was like, look, I don't know if this is true or not. Like, I don't know if you're trying to trick me or not, but there was such hope in him that it could, you know, if there's a chance that it is true, then he wanted to be supportive of that. It's an incredible piece of,
it's an infiltration, essentially. I think Mike Rinder actually left this, didn't really, but pretended to have left the Sea Organization to participate in that.
Oh, okay. Oh, no. He was doing it from the inside. That was the whole thing. It was an inside. I'm part of this inside the Loyalists, and we don't want to like reveal. We don't want to give ourselves away. We have to be very careful. There's a lot of risk here. I'm very scared. I'm really. This is what Mike Rinder was saying. Like, I'm really paranoid. You know, I'm worried about what could happen. What could be the consequences? And Jerry Armstrong's like, oh man. He's like, look, you got the power. You can do it. Like, if you guys did this, it would be so amazing. And you know,
interesting.
Fascinating conversation.
Absolutely, we should do it sometime. And it is, again, there's key moments in time where one or two people speaking up could have changed everything. I mean, just when, I mean, guys, Dave Miscavige was not in charge of everything. He just was managing the communication lines to L. Ron Hubbard. There were other people far more benevolent and kind-hearted than Dave Miscavige that were in charge. Now, that does not mean Scientology is not a cult or that it would have ended up bad for a lot of people anyways.
Oh, yeah. But, like, Scientology is a pile of poop, basically. Like, there isn't, I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. I'm not recommending it. No, and I don't even necessarily want, right. The thing is that if, you know, I guess, like, and I'm not even hopeful for any kind of revolution. I don't care who's in charge there. I think the structure of it, I think that the not allowing children justice because they're in this position of power, that they're protected by, you know, religious exemptions and all this. They're protected by the law. It's a crazy situation. I think they should lose their tax exempt status. And that's in relation 100%. To like the structure of it, right? Yeah. The writings of it is garbage. But here's the thing as well is like, what's, you know, we don't want to delete history, right? We don't want to 1984 the things should still be accessible to people in terms of like, oh, okay, this is what happened, this had happened before, because then how do we learn as a society and evolve from it? People, I think it's a good thing for people to understand what Scientology was and is, and that's part of like what we're doing. It's like if we can impart that understanding of like what this is and the harm that it has, and the harm is in the processing, it's in the the writings and the rest of it. But as a theory, it's kind of, I mean, it's kind of funny to watch that there was like this play that like happened that was pretend. Anyways, this thing between Jerry Armstrong and Mike Rinder. It's quite
no. I agree. And it's a subject we can absolutely delve into too, because it is kind of fascinating. I mean, look, in the end, Scientology does not work. And L. Ron Hubbard, I think, you know, there's been a lot of debate whether he really believes in it or whether even Dave Miscavige believes in it. I think to some degree, Dave Miscavige believes in it. No one could tell you that for sure. But I think L. Ron Hubbard really believed in it. But I also think he knew he was scamming quite a few people. But he was also insane, so he could have believed in it. But guys, let's be honest. There's basic parts of Scientology that are understandable, that may even be beneficial to some people. But because it doesn't work in the long run, they implemented policies to keep people trapped and in there. And that's the most abusive part of Scientology to me. They did that because they knew they were going to inevitably lose people. Because it doesn't really work. And then they implemented these draconian policies. And anyways, it ended up turning like 1984, right? Essentially, which is why we're
here's the thing. If let's put this in like a dating scenario. If I was like, oh, here's my crazy, like no one would date me. I'm just trying to like abstract this. But
I get what you're saying.
It's like, so it's like Aaron Hubbard, he needed to seduce people. And so he showed them these things that at the beginning, it's funny because they only exist at the beginning.
Yes,
they
that's
disappear as you go. So that's interesting. And so all it is like it's that piece of cheese.
Yeah, it's that you are responsible for your life. You're at cause over everything, and that concept is fantastic. But then later on, it's body thetans, it's evil spirits, it's everything else. But the beginning is that you can control everything in your life. Of course, that's a great concept. I mean, mind you, many people.
I mean, it's not true.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not true. It's like an impossible thing. I mean, it's alluring. It's alluring even as well as like immortality. Like, ooh, that's alluring. No one wants to die. If you can sell that, if you can sell someone immortality, it's like it's fucking genius. Like, it's a great plan. It's a great idea.
Exactly.
Right. So it's like, it's like, But anyways, that's okay.
So another subject we could go into for hours.
Yeah.
But okay, cool. Let's pick up a couple more here and let's see what we got. Where did I end off? Okay, this one. Marcia, is the RPF really no longer in reality? As far as we know, it is not, and that's a good goddamn thing. But mind you, I really don't necessarily think that's totally true, Mirriam, and here's why I think that. You may no longer have the black uniforms. You may no longer have them running around with armbands. You may no longer have that schedule. There is definitely somewhere where they punish people. There's a room 101 somewhere. It's just different, and you can't see it anymore. Right?
You said that so well. I'm not even going to add to it. That's 100,000%. I agree with that.
There's no way that they can get rid of their old behavior like that. I just don't believe it totally. D. Marie, what's a birthing building? You know, that would be a building where they have babies. And funny enough, because it was a former hospital, it kind of was a birthing building. But the word I was using was birthing, BERTHING, birth. Dormitory room where sailors stay. It's Sea Org vernacular. It just means the rooms where the staff slept. Berthing. Yeah.
So I guess it's a nautical term or a naval term
berth,
or whatever.
Right.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Mike Brown, we have a new VO talent for the events lined up. Oh yeah. I'd be good at that. I think. I always wonder why they had to hire outside talent. I mean, all of us could have done that. Really. Chow Yun Smut. Miscavige was turning knobs question. Sterling Miscavige is a knob. That's one of the best comments of the night.
Yeah.
He is a knob. I agree.
He is.
Ouch. God, that's where I want to be sometimes. Man Alive, you are talking about one of my favorite books. Thanks for talking about your experience with the book. Well, thank you, Mirriam, for being here to talk with me about it, because you're the first person I've actually had a chance of doing that with, and I really appreciate it. So
I've loved it so far. I feel like there's like still so much to talk about, which is
so much.
Fun.
I've got on my other screen here, Mirriam, I've got like 25 quotes from 1984 that we could dissect and break apart. We're going to be doing this for a while.
Amazing.
It's going to be our job.
Yeah, I love that. You know, it's so important. And what's cool is, like, as I said, this was his parting message to the world. That's how important it is. This was a brilliant man. And so if we spend the next 6 months on this, I don't mind.
Right.
I mean,
and if one person doesn't join Scientology or leaves because of it, we've done our job. If the new head of the IRS is a giant George Orwell fan and goes, maybe these guys have a point, maybe I should look at their tax-exempt status, we've done our job, right?
Well, what's interesting, Sterling, is essentially this book, 1984, it should be actually approved reading because Hubbard mentions it in his writing. So essentially, it could be the book that you could hand to somebody that's still in right?
Right.
Because it's not an anti-Scientology book.
No, that's right.
So that's something.
And I still think the one little thing that no one can deny, because you can read it and deny many points and go, well, it's not really like that for us, is the thought police. I don't think you can deny the thought police. I'm sorry that I don't think that's possible. It's so evidently Scientology, and we got to cover the thought police in one whole episode. We can't talk about it.
And Sterling,
yeah,
thought crimes, which I know
Yes.
is very relevant to your story.
Oh my
Also
God.
to mine as well, but I think for anyone in that situation, but
Yeah.
I've heard you talk about your experiences. So yeah, that's another time.
I got removed from a position because of a thought, not because of anything I ever actually did. Do you know how torturous that is? Like, I would rather have done something wrong and been accused of it. Or been punished for something I did wrong. But being accused for a thought you had, it's a horrible experience. Yeah, you are right. Okay, so this was Mike Brown. I remember KJ like that too, of course. Like you pointed out, Mirriam, is it not the smile, it's the kindness?
Yeah, it's not being nice. We should value kindness over niceness.
Yes.
So
nice
can you guys explain something that she did that was kind? Like an action that she did that was kind, or was she just like, I'm just fucking nice. I'm just like,
right.
I don't know. In my mind, I've like distorted her into this like maniac, maniacal, like.
Think about it too. The bar was set pretty low.
Oh, true. Oh,
right?
true.
So if anyone smiled and gave you a little bit, especially at that base, they were awesome. The bar is set pretty goddamn low there, right? I mean, because it's so bad there. Any sort of love, I wouldn't want to call it love, any sort of smile or humanity at all would have been pleasurable to someone that was going through a rough time. That does not make your mom a good person or a nice person. Because I agree.
And also, Sterling, and I 100% agree with you on that. And also, if you had asked me about my mother, 20 years ago, if you'd asked me about her when I was a kid, I would have given you, glowing terms. I would have said that I love her. I thought she was beautiful. I admired her. I thought she was, like a superhero, like a Scientology superhero. Like I was, I admired her so much. I wanted so badly to have a relationship with her. It was something that, kind of tormented me that I was always apart from her. And so, it's just like but now I'm 39 years old and I'm I see the world differently. I see human interactions differently. I see my relationship with her now, and who she is differently. But I also, would agree that, there's that idea like she's a victim as well. It's just a different story. It's a different
story also because she's your parent. There's an inherent responsibility that comes with that. But I also believe in my heart that if she came out now, there would have to be a serious conversation.
Oh, would have to be.
You might have
forgiveness. Oh, no, actually, no, Sterling. I 10 years ago, yes, that we could have had a serious conversation. Now. I would have welcomed her with open arms. Not today. If I saw her, I would just cross another street. Or if someone called me, and I'm being honest. That's the thing, is I'm being honest about this. And I know this might seem really cold and really removed, and that's how I feel about her. I do feel cold and removed, and that protects me. I don't want my heart to be, constantly, just I don't want to be heartbroken. Yeah, exactly. So for me now, if I heard, I would just be like, no, go to,
and you know what, you have a complete right to have that feeling, and I don't judge either way because I think that that's an individual thing, and it doesn't make anyone good or bad. It is how you feel, and it's different, and I'm having to understand that feeling because it's not something I've experienced. Because like I discussed with Liz yesterday, sometimes in the parent lottery you get lucky or you don't. And so I understand your scenario pretty clearly, and I get that. And
let's say this as well, Sterling. Like my feelings and thoughts on it are different because and the difference between you and I is that I've had recent betrayals. I've had like real time betrayals like recently, whereas you probably haven't experienced like brutal betrayals by your
That's right.
father, for example, who's still in, and who, if he came out, you would welcome him with open arms. And it's just that the things that she has done more recently were just like, I could like the door closed. I couldn't.
Yeah, and especially in regards to your father too. Especially in regards to your father, right? I mean,
That is specifically what I'm talking about. Yeah.
So yes, and it's a different scenario. So again, from me to you, I understand that. And again, I ask that question to people I talk to, but I understand that. I really do. I really do.
Yeah.
And you know that I would love to champion that you get justice at some point on this. I really hope that happens. I really do.
Yeah. I appreciate you.
Let's pull up the next one. Scientology triggers. I did blow on foot from into 1982. I think that's before they had fences. So does it really count? You'll have to let me know.
I would love to hear that story. My
So would
goodness.
I.
Yeah.
So would I.
Yeah.
Atkins in Texas. It's still hard for me to fathom that this is really real. Routing out, escaping, being under watch, no access to phones, disconnection. It's crazy. I'm so sorry for you all.
Yeah.
Thank you for your understanding. It is insane, Mirriam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sterling, like I wish there was a reality where that wasn't something that I knew. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
know
it's
what?
interesting. Sorry.
I'm
go ahead.
watching this documentary called The Program, and it's fascinating because when they exited one of these facilities, they left all the videotape. So they've actually got videotape of pinning teenagers down with 4 or 5 adults and a lot of the abuse. And I so wish we had some of those things. Now, a lot of these facilities are still up and running because the government's really slow on this stuff. But it's fascinating. They have the in writing documents showing that they falsified drug tests to keep teenage students there. All these things. It's mind blowing to me. I'm almost done with the series. I think I got like 20 more minutes. But if you haven't watched it, watch it. It's crazy. We'll have to. Well, actually, we should do a reaction video to that series when we're done with 1984. So in about 2 years. In about 2 years.
No, because you mentioned that when you were talking to Liz, and then also someone else had mentioned that somewhere, in a comment, a message, or something like that. And so I looked it up, and I was like, okay, all right, I will watch it. I'm gonna brace myself. Again, it's gonna be one of those things that's really real, but
it is really real.
You know what's amazing is that this sort of stuff is being shown on Netflix. Incredible. Like that's what we need more of. We need more of, listen, this is the thing. All of this, everything that I'm doing is for me, and it is about the protection of children. It's about advocating for the rights of children. It's about talking about crimes that children experienced, which were covered up. Everything that I'm doing is about children. And I think that when you share stories and you tell this story publicly, you're bringing more awareness to it. And then awareness, then it's like consciousness and rebellion, and then maybe there's going to be more rebellion, and that's going to stem more rebellion. We need to be interested in what's happening to children and what's still happening to them today. So for big networks to bring out stories like this, of any harm of any children, particularly in institutions, because that's where it's more, the institution gets the protection rather than the vulnerable child.
They're protecting the corporations, the government. When you watch the documentary, it's shell organizations that protect the whole thing. Guess who else has shell organizations everywhere? Scientology. Actually, Scientology is mentioned in the documentary. Yeah. And by the way,
it is mentioned. Okay.
It is actually mentioned. As a high control group, and the wonderful lady that is the driving force behind this documentary. I now realize it's you that remind me of her. You'll see. Watch it. Yes, she's got a brilliant mind at the same time, and she kind of figures it out, and she's this driving force behind it, and she fascinates me. The fact that she could be so normal, and I know she has a lot of trauma and a lot of pain, but the fact that she could pull this together and put something like this together with what she's experienced is pretty unbelievable. It's pretty unbelievable. Anyways,
so I just that's amazing, and I want to comment on that because when we talk about Eric Blair, who wrote 1984, who is George Orwell, the same thing. It's like one of the things, and I want to as I said, we'll go into his biography a bit later on another time. But one of the things is like he could see things that other people couldn't. And it's because of his experiences, and his experiences influenced his writing, right? And that's very much is in this book. But he is a child, as I said, was a child that was brutalized in a boarding school. And also I would say that would correlate with children in orphanages. So children in institutionalized care. So for the Australian government, they committed atrocities against the Indigenous people and their children, separating them from their parents and putting them into, it was often like a religious institution where horrific crimes were perpetrated against those children. So we see it everywhere. We see it within the Catholic Church. We see it. So it's not just religions, it's governmental organizations, agencies, it's it could be educational institutes. It could be many. It's
easier to start a reform school for children than it is to start a restaurant in the United States.
Oh my God, that's shocking.
I mean, seriously, you have to get a license to start a restaurant. These guys were operating without licenses. They weren't even accredited schools. They had one staff member that had a teacher's accreditation. It's crazy. And I think it runs, the gamut runs through all the different governments on our planet. Unfortunately, at this point, the protection for children in these type of scenarios is horrible. The fact that the parent can even sign them over without any sort of check or even background check or anything like that is also an atrocity. So yeah, we're definitely gonna have to talk about that series for sure.
And I would say as well, I really want to say this really clearly, is like, this is the most important movement, is focusing on protection of children. And why is that? Because children represent the future, and that's not just a fucking cliche, it's literal. If we want to stop this cycle of systemic abuse of children, we have to focus on how do we bring protection in place for children in institutions. We have to we have to make that difference. And we had the women's rights movement. Okay, well, we now need to have, this is the children's rights movement, and everyone, no matter what their age or whatever their level of involvement in this should be global. This should be a global movement, not just about Scientology,
organizations
but
and religions. Because it's everywhere.
Correct.
It's everywhere. Well said, Mirriam. Well said. Scientology off the rails. Mirriam, please do another video about the experience with LAPD when you were younger, if you can. That'd be a great idea.
I should. Yes.
Sarah Browett did ask this. I think she might need help showing how to co-stream to her channel, as I know the fundraiser. We didn't do a fundraiser, but I would love to do a fundraiser. Was on everyone's channel, but not Mirriam, as is this one, would get her view to help her channel grow. Yeah, I actually did not know that until she mentioned it. Did you not?
Okay, so yes, the fundraiser. I know this is me. This is purely on me. I just haven't figured out how you do that yet. And I know that it takes time. You've got to do something, and then there's this step, and then there's that step. And I happen to, because I'm always kind of like, just like go. Usually I slide into like a live, like 10 minutes before, generally like 10 minutes before it starts. And so I'm like, oh, I didn't have time this time. I'll do it next time. But Sterling, I was wondering if you could download this video and send it to me, and then I can upload it on my channel. And I apologize to my subscribers. But yeah, I will figure out how to do that. But I want to say that for my beautiful subscribers, thank you so much for your incredible support. It's amazing. And I'm so excited. I've got a whole series that I'm going to be giving out, that I'm going to be bringing. I'm going to start recording it this weekend, over the course of this weekend. And I've got, I think it's going to be spicy, and I think it's going to be interesting. And it's just going to have a lot of truth. And we love that. So it'll be coming. I haven't stopped. It's just a matter of time, just getting time to do things. That's all.
Yes, it does. We'll go on that later, but it does take some time to prep for this, even mentally, to get on here. And there's always nerves and all that kind of stuff. But I will download the video. You ask me if you need help anytime getting it to your channel. It should be a little thing on the top right. But if you need tech support, you know where I'm at.
Okay.
I'll help you with that.
Okay. Cool.
Awesome. Okay, here we got Holly Brew, stimulating conversation. Do more book reviews. Maybe we should. Maybe we should.
We ain't done with this one yet, but absolutely.
Right. Yeah, we got to. Laura Font.
I'm glad you're doing good.
I'm telling you, through Scientology, Van Tree is like a small town. That's true. I grew up and it's exactly the same. Totally normal to me. Haha. Thank you, Laura Font. You're amazing. Right. Sterling and his silent sex life. I have no clue what Mike Brown's referring to, guys. I don't know what he's talking about. I think that it's all lies. It's all lies. Right now, my sex life's pretty silent, unfortunately. Tazzy D, please can Mirriam upload this? We Aussie Neverends want to get her monetized. Absolutely. That's funny because I started this a long time ago. Or no, it was started automatically about a long time ago.
What's the goal to get monetized? I don't even know. Like I don't know much about YouTube at all. This is real fresh for me. But.
I think it's 4,000 watch hours or something like that. You know who knows this?
Oh, it's a lot.
Yeah, Aaron, you should hit that easily.
Okay, because does it count? So it's like a total of all the people and the hours.
Yeah, so you upload this. If you get 1,000 views, this is an hour and 39 minutes. It should be no problem.
Gotcha.
It's 2,000 subs. Well, Laura Font said it's 2,000 subs. That's easy. You're past that already.
Yeah.
Laura Font also said shh, which I don't know why, Laura, you're saying that to Mirriam. She wasn't even talking. Thank you so much for that. I'm just teasing Laura now. Let's see what else. I think that's it. But yes, I will download this. Here's the last one. Stacy Toms. I thought that was pretty sweet. Mike Brown, I think you need to join the next video with Sterling and Mirriam. That trio would rock. It would be pretty good. I don't think we'd all talk over each other. It would be kind of, smooth and all have interesting points. So maybe we do that. Maybe we can join Mike in on our next 1984 review. That would be fun.
Yes.
Be fun.
Oh, because we're going to talk about the sex?
Yeah, that's why. Because he was my roommate, so he knows all about my sex. Because my wall had absolutely no soundproofing. Absolutely none. Thank you, Scientology, for that trauma I'm never going to get over.
Wait, so this was when you were in a couple, like you were married?
Oh yeah. So we'll get to finish with this. So it was a 2-bedroom apartment, and Mike and Sam were in the back bedroom. To the right of them was Seth Price and Mamika Price. And what they did is they took the living room that was right off the kitchen and they built a faux wall out of styrofoam and a laminated cupboard. So literally there was no soundproofing. Like when Mike would leave in the morning, a few times he would just knock, Sterling. It was like he was in the room. And so when the door opened, anything like that, and when you were having sex, it built in this sort of it's just like you didn't want to be heard, right? Come on. It was so strange. I mean, if they were having a conversation in the kitchen, it was like they were, sitting on my bedside table talking in my ear. It was so weird. And I just had the bad luck of having that room. That's all that happened. So, it's trauma that I'll never get rid of. Sorry.
Well, I wonder from Mike Brown if he felt the same kind of almost like introversion as well, of like the awareness, the hyper awareness of like other people hearing him, or was he like, I don't give a fuck, or like, I want to know what his attitude was. I
want to say Mike feels that deeply about that stuff, but I don't think he did. I don't think he did. Now, mind you, I have gotten over that a little bit because I have messed around in a few locations that you would consider sort of edgy. So I'm kind of over that, but there's still not a lot of talking or noises that are going on. So yeah.
Okay.
We'll leave it at
more
that.
Healing. More healing.
Yeah, more healing on that one. I maybe should see a therapist about
healing.
Yeah. Well, did I tell you tomorrow is my first Little League baseball game?
Yeah.
To be clear, I'm not playing in the game. I'm a coach.
Are you coaching? Yeah.
Assistant coach. So yeah, I can't wait. I'm excited. I got to get up at 6:30 in the morning, so I'm there by 7:30 for warm-ups. The game starts at 9. So I'm excited. I'll let you know how it goes.
We gotta let you get to bed then.
I know.
And that's exciting. I do want to know how it goes. Yeah.
I will let you know. And next time we do it live, I want to see if we can work it in a Saturday morning, if that's possible.
Okay. Saturday morning.
We'll get a little more traction on Saturday morning, and it's kind of like prime time. And I know a lot of people like Saturday mornings, so we'll try to do that.
Okay.
You are awesome, Mirriam. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I love chatting with you. And it was better than I would have expected. So thank you so much. I'm gonna hit you with this awesome outro I have with fellow Australian. No, is he Australian or is he New Zealand?
Russell. Oh yeah, he's
I know,
spicy.
right? It's confusing. I think he's from New Zealand.
Well, Australia has, I don't know, that's very controversial. Okay. We cannot confirm. We cannot confirm that at this point. Wait, let
I'm
me
just
see
stepping
it.
on everyone's toes now. All right. You're awesome. I'm gonna hit this with the outro. Here we go. 1 second.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?